Okay, so along the lines of that flood proofing side of business, today we're joined by the Vice President of Engineering. Juan, why don't you do us a favor? Introduce yourself and what you guys do.
Hi, thank you for having me, Alex. My name is Juan Posada. I'm the VP of Engineering for FanX LLC. We're a company located in South Florida, specialized in the manufacturing of specialty glazing products. We do anything from mitigation of hurricanes, flood events, impacts, high-end residential, commercial. So anything specialty, even getting into the bulletproofing, fireproofing, that's what we specialize on. We do a lot of the structural engineer behind it, the manufacturing, product development. So a little bit of everything on that field of specialty glazing.
And when I first talked to Brian Johnson, he obviously he's in the flood proofing business as well. And the first thing he told me was, dude, I'm working with this gentleman, and he absolutely has to be someone that you have to talk to, right? And for me, it was like you don't have to tell me twice. And for me, one of the things is as I was looking through the website, and even Brian was talking about some of the projects and some of the products that you were talking about, I realized that this is super cool, right? Because for one, uh, where I was born and raised, where I grew up, flooding wasn't that big of a thing until the last say 5-10 years. But also with everything going on in the world, people realize that the one thing that most people overlook in terms of security is glass, right? Whether it's a storefront window, whether it's your home window, windows in, at home, or whatever other applications you have. And I mean, maybe I'm being childish about it, but I remember when some time ago there was a video of there were floodwaters coming. What this guy did was he decided to intentionally flood his business with the logic of at least one way or another, it's going to flood. But at the very least, I would rather have clean water in my building. And I was like, I don't
Saw that
understand
video.
why he did that. And then realized he goes, you need to stabilize the pressure. And I was like, I don't understand. And then I saw a video of where floodwaters legitimately just tore through a window. I'm like, oh, okay, right.
Now I get it exactly.
Yeah, and could you talk me through? And so, look, I am ignorant as it pertains to glass. As far as I knew, you melt sand and it turns into this glass product. But we all know it's much more sophisticated. Could you walk me through some of the product solutions that you have and some of the things that you have available today?
So yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of the backstory of how the products got developed. So we're a company, like I said, based in South Florida. So a little bit different than the rest of the country. Florida has been pretty much slammed every year by hurricanes, and there was a big change in technology and codes, the building codes that happened after Hurricane Andrew in the early '90s. So that drove the industry to create new technologies to protect buildings, because one of the things that they noted was that with the standard construction methods that are used in Florida, and I will say in most of the regions of the US, these buildings were failing through, the failure modes were first the windows were gone through an impact of any flying debris object or anything else that will impact the glass. And then these houses were not designed, like you were saying with the example of the gentleman that flooded in the inside, they were not designed to hold the pressure from the inside. So the houses will inflate like a balloon, and then your roof was gone. After the roof was gone, then these structures lack stability, and then they will collapse. Well, like they could partially collapse or fully collapse, but that was one of the main things that they saw, and that created a whole movement to develop systems that were able to take impacts and protect the building envelope from impacts and the high pressures coming from hurricanes.
Mhm.
So fast forward, 20 something years, then we start looking at flooding. And it goes on a similar way, but slightly different from the origin of it. So if you were to equalize the structure, as you were saying, having equal pressure on the outside and the inside, then in theory, you're not compromising the stability of the structure, but the water has a tremendous amount of force when it's coming on the outside, because it's not just stagnant water. A lot of the times you have hydrodynamics, you have waves, breaking waves, a lot of different loads that are described in the code, depending on where you're located, if you're in a coastal area, non-coastal area. And then also it's damaging power. You only need about a couple of inches of water to create tremendous, insurance claims, because you're gonna ruin tile, you're gonna ruin walls, everything, electric. So that's one of the reasons these products came along. Probably when you talk to Brian, you noted that there's different methods to flood-proof a building. The oldest, and I would say the most basic one, is by equalizing. You just allow flood waters to come in, you have equal levels, and then the structure is protected. But what happens to businesses, hospitals, that they need to keep operating every day, even through the storm? They need to keep operating and not have, a lobby or a basement compromise. You need to keep the flood waters out of there. And that's where our products came along, from the need of dry flood proofing buildings in a way that allows the operators to keep operating during and after, and not compromising their structures or their businesses. And from the other side, it's not only that, but the fact that throughout the whole East Coast, and I will say because that's where we see the most amount of push for these solutions. We have some other projects in other regions of the country. The lobbies become a really important part of commercial property, commercial real estate. So that's where you have your anchor tenants, you have, restaurants, stores, or you have the really expensive lobby, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a hospital, which are some of our main clients when we provide the solutions. So nobody want to have a bunker looking building in the middle of Manhattan, in the middle of Brickell in Miami. So that's where we came. We said, how do we keep the status quo and make flood proofing a building still aesthetic and still beautiful? Because there's other solutions like logs, metal logs, but they're not really good looking. You're putting them in the middle of the sidewalk. So there's some downside to those solutions. So having the expertise on the mitigation, on the hurricane mitigation side, we went full gear into developing flood mitigation products. A whole different animal, much larger forces, because of, you can be looking at 10 foot of water. Some of the solutions that we have provided in New York City, New Jersey, for essential facilities like hospitals, there are 10 foot of flood waters, hydrodynamic, breaking waves, and then Florida degree impacts. You can have a log that is moving with the water and could be anything, even a car hitting this. So that was kind of the genesis of the products. And from there, we started with window walls and windows, and then other solutions came along. And eventually, if I'm in New York, I would love to take you to some of the projects that we've done there, like the Jewish Heritage Center. We provided a flood barrier in the perimeter of the building, right in the Battery Park. Like, this is like the heart of the financial district, like right there. And they had a big problem with flood mitigation. Previous events flooded the whole battery, damaging the buildings, preventing them to go back to operation right after the event. So these kind of solutions, like a flood barrier, allowed cities to do this. And then we're seeing a lot of traction. We just finished a project in the middle of Tarpon City in the west coast of Florida, where you have these little islands that are within the whole periphery of Florida, and they're connected by bridges. So not even with a major event, but just with a king tide, that island was not communicated to the mainland in the city. So how do you do to protect that, but at the same time, you're in an area that has a lot of real estate value from a touristic standpoint, and also from a residential real estate? How do you solve that and not putting an ugly concrete wall? This is where we come along. We created a solution that was part concrete, part glass, where you can still see the whole cove, you can see the boats, you can see the vessels, and still preserve that beautiful view while being safe.
And this is where from a layman's perspective, I think it's gonna be hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around it, right? Because as a New Yorker, the my reference point for super strong, secure windows was the glass that had the metal mesh embedded within the glass. So if you try to smash in a window, right? But thankfully, it looks like your company has things that where you're not looking at. To your point, you can still look outside. You still have a wide open, right? You're not nothing's inhibited from you to look out the window and see clear vision, right?
Correct.
Now, if you were to put it in perspective from again a layman who doesn't understand the difference in glass, let's take this, for instance, like this is a standard issue, construction grade, residential construction grade glass window, right? Could you talk to me about the difference in terms of the way it's sealed or the tensile, like whatever it is, the difference between the glasses, let's say, you would have for a homeowner versus, say, what is a pre-existing standard issue glass window?
Correct. So it varies a lot depending on the geographic location that you're at. So, for example, in Georgia, there are not general guidelines to have hurricane or flood resistant windows in the code. So it will depend where you're at.
Mhm.
So in a residential building, you won't typically have a laminated assembly. So similar in the, let's say, in the process,
Mhm.
but not quite the same. That wire mesh was trying to keep the pieces together and prevent from breaking the whole glass and it collapsing.
Mhm.
So there are different parts to it. One is the lamination process, and then there is the engineering of the glass. So that's just one component. So you start by designing the window and seeing what the configurations are, like sizes, the loads that are required in that region, obviously code compliance, but you got to start from the glass. How is it going to be processed? So all the glass, if you see it on the naked eye, it will look the same, but there's many different levels of glass based on strength. You can have anneal glass, which they call float glass, that is non-tempered glass, non-thermal process glass. Then you can have heat strengthened glass, which is somewhat in the middle in terms of resistance. It has some features from an aesthetic standpoint that could be better than the highest grade, that is tempered glass, which is the highest level, and it's called also safety glass. So the safety glass provides you with, structurally speaking, the strongest glass from a thermal treatment standpoint. But then what happens if that glass breaks? It will shatter in little pieces. So how do you provide that assembly? Because like I'm saying, I'm going to use the term assembly because it could be windows, window walls, curtain walls. There's like a quadrillion configurations in the industry. But then that assembly won't have the resilience that you want for the envelope. So that's where the lamination process comes in. By laminating two plies of glass with an interlayer, there's many interlayers. We have actually partnered up for, I think by now, almost 8 years with Cure, which is a Japanese company that has a strong presence in the US. We have partnered up with them, introducing their products for assemblies because they provide the highest resilience on this. Even if it breaks, it will still hold in the terms of the flood waters. During our testing, we on purpose broke the glass because it's glass. It could break under different circumstances. So what happens if that glass breaks? Is the building envelope going to be compromised, or we're going to have like a doomsday event where it's just a big wave getting into the building?
Mm-hmm.
We went through that testing, and we were able to prove that even if it was broken, it could hold the water. That for us is one of the essential points on flood fenestration products. We believe that you should always test them under the worst case scenario, so you're not compromising the interior of the building. So right after that, you got the frame. So with that frame, uh, the glass can be really strong, but if it's not properly held to that frame, then it will fail miserably. So that's where the engineering of these components come. There's many materials. We go to stainless steel or aluminum as our preferred products, and they're typical of the industry. And you got to engineer them in a way that they're not so stiff that they won't have any movement and be more brittle, but also no so ductile or weak, let's say it, that they will bend and just disengage from the system.
Mhm.
Then there's other components like sealants, gaskets, and glazing details, which is like the secret sauce. How much is the bite and different like industry specific variables that will yield that product that is going to be aesthetically pleasing, but at the same time it's going to be resilient.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of encompasses in a pretty short time what are the main components.
And that actually, you touched on a brilliant thing because, and I shouldn't be laughing, but I've seen in my time in real estate, there have been oftentimes like, oh yeah, like we got new windows installed. It paid, how many tens of thousands of dollars. They want to brag about all this, and then new person comes in like, dude, your window's leaking, and it's and or you're that, or like it doesn't seem to be sealing anything. I feel the elements, and then sure enough, another contract comes, takes a look, goes, these these knuckleheads just put the window in. They didn't seal or they didn't adhere to anything. There's no proper um like waterproofing of anything. There's no sealing of anything. They just screwed it into the existing frame. Like you didn't do anything. And I think you brought up a really great thing here because it's one thing for you to create the glass itself, right? But I imagine you guys are also handling the installation, and so for me, from a customer client perspective, it's like, okay, you put it in, you got me this product, and it's great, right? But how good is it if the window is fine, but the water's still flooding in from wherever you're trying to install this into?
100%.
And so and correct me if I'm wrong here, it seems to me that you are ensuring that the installation is handled in such a way that you could say FanX checks off on this. Is that right?
So at least in our case, we get really involved on the design and engineering process.
Mhm.
We do not perform like the labor on the field, but everything is detailed and procedures, checks are provided to the installers and all the parties involved just to make sure that everything is good. Because just like you said, the system can be perfect, but if you don't waterproof properly the opening,
Mhm.
then from a water infiltration standpoint, it's just gonna fail miserably. So there's a couple of spots that we always make sure that are um, you know checked before even the products arrive, which is the opening. Is it the correct size and everything? How is the installer preparing, and are they checking that the materials are compatible? You can have even failures. Like they could do a great job applying the products and everything. But if there was no an adherence test or a compatibility test, you can have materials that are not compatible, and they will do a chemical reaction, and then over time they'll fail, and you start having water leakage. And it doesn't have to be something crazy like
Mhm.
a flood event. It could be just a heavy rain,
Mhm.
and you get a lot of those in New York. We get a lot of those here in Florida, and with wind driven rain, it's even 10 times worse.
Mhm.
So that is an essential part to our process, having the right partners on the field that they really care, and they're not just putting a window in the opening and just going about their day. There's a lot of checks and a lot of complexities that happen on the field, precision, materials that you got to ensure they're good so everything works fine. And then the QA/QC after. A lot of the projects that we have done in the past years with for flood proofing solutions, they always require a hydrostatic test afterwards. So they'll build like a little pool in some of the openings and actually perform a test without impact, obviously, because nobody wants to break the systems. But they'll do that, and they'll have the system exposed to hours of hydrostatic pressure just to see how it performs. And then you're assessing if the proper QA/QC was done on the manufacturing of the product, on the installation, on the handling, and then that everything is kosher.
That makes sense.
So that is the right approach.
Absolutely.
Otherwise you're compromising a lot of things. And I want to finish with this: that little extra effort after, financially speaking, will save tons after, because once you have to remove a window, remove finishes, and you already damaged the interior of the building, you're looking at a really like big bill.
Yeah. And so this goes out to anyone who is, I mean, look, if you guys are able to get a hold of critical systems, right? Again, like you want to do things with molding, you want to get cute with it, fine, do what you want. Like this is up to you and the if you're on the construction side, that's between you and whoever's contracting you. But building owners or decision makers for these buildings and those who are installing these things, please don't get cute, right? If you want to deviate or go off script, and I mean, unfortunately, I've seen enough times where like they decided either they're going to cut corners or like, oh, this particular material isn't conveniently available to me, and so decide, oh, I've done this type of work for 30 years, I know what I'm doing. No, 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 don't go off script, please. Like again, I understand regular things like regular glass is glass, right? You've done this for decades, I understand. Where I've seen things also go wrong in some other projects where there was, for instance, I think it was some kind of metal, and they're like, do not use X, Y, and Z types of metal, it will harm the system. And it wasn't glass, I forgot what it was, it's driving me crazy now. But essentially what had happened was, because this specific product was rated for a specific type of hardness in the metal, it was a reason for it. And so as the winds blew, eventually it started to shear through and bend and compromise the system, and eventually the thing collapsed. And of course the owners were irate, and they're like, oh, how dare you. Well, look, let us bring our guys on site, we'll take a look, and if it is indeed a failure, we'll pay for the replacement ourselves, right? Doing right business the right way. As it turns out, he goes, what is that? It's 2 seconds. What is that? And he goes, you told us to have this harness, this whatever thing to set this structure up. That's what we did. He goes, that's not it. That's like galvanized steel. That's not what we asked for. That's not what was on the spec. You guys went off script. And of course, then the owner found out it was the contractors who decided, hey, they're both metals. This one's stronger. It should be fine. No, 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 no. So guys, please, please, if you are gonna go off script, go to manufacturer, go to the people who are designing the thing, understand what you're doing, please. Like, because I cannot stress this enough. It's the little things, fine, I don't care. And like where I got into this whole interest in flood proofing is, for me, the biggest like eye opening thing was for us Hurricane Sandy. And at the time, we had, I was working at NYU, and so obviously me being part of on the research side, as this happened, obviously there were a lot of facilities where the labs were essentially in the basement. The problem here was, they had these like big, thick steel doors, and it was supposed to be rated to a point where like you could run a Mack truck through it and it should be fine. And then you see these pictures where they're like bent like tinfoil, and they're like, yeah, we didn't. We never thought that water was going to go ever raise to that level.
Yeah.
And B, we figured, dude, if you're saying that a truck could hit this and it should be okay, a little water should not be a problem.
Should not hurt. Yeah.
Should, right? And then you see this picture, and that one failure, and I'm sure the other parts of the building and a lot of parts were compromised, turned into billions of dollars of research gone.
Wow.
Right? And I still to this day remember, I was like, oh, like there's like mice on this thing. I'm like, I mean, I'm thinking pet store logic of like, how much could these things be? I'm like, millions of dollars? How? And you're like, you understand that this one mouse is not just a mouse, it's all the research that went into the mouse. And so this one obviously no one would have knew for Hurricane Sandy, but now I think a lot more buildings, facilities, and they're realizing, hey, I understand some of these systems are a lot more expensive than our usual like double glazed or triple glazed glass, right? Your standard issue again. But let's think about this for a second. If these storms, and now we have things like riots, now we have things like other freak storm incidences, what is it worth for us to say go with the standard solution as opposed to let's just future proof a little bit, right? And I get it, we might cut into our revenues or whatever our numbers are, but is it worth it for us to take this additional extra step to say, hey, this might actually save us large sums of money in the future, right? And so you did mention that, obviously I was gearing this towards the floodproof, but you did mention like things like bulletproof glass. So I'm assuming that you have other like security type product solutions in the mix.
Correct.
And so what are those? What do some of those look like?
So as I mentioned, we have Hurricane, which is I would say the largest part of our business. By being here in Florida, is something that always comes our way, and bulletproof glass, and I say glass for not saying system because it's not just the glass; got to be the system. The frame has to be able to withstand the passage of bullets, and then there is standards for it. So there's a rating for .22 caliber, but then there's a rating for .38 caliber. So, for example, we work with a UL standard, and it happened the same in Manhattan. We did a project for the New York, New Jersey Port Authority at the World Trade Center.
Mhm.
So this was a flood resistant UL level 8 rated system. So it was on the safe boots, so it had to withstand flooding and also had to withstand, you know, a rifle, pretty much shooting through it. So those are some of the technologies that we have the capability of putting together in the same system, testing them, engineer them, so you can have a mix of these two worlds and protect the building. So you touch on a really good point. There is is it worth it? So we've seen a big change within different geographic regions. And the main thing is because of how real estate works there. For example, in the South Florida region, in the coastal areas that are the most impacted by floodwaters and hurricanes as well, you have these condo buildings where, the development team and the design team have a different investment horizon. Typically, they'll sell the units. These are not rental units. They'll sell the units. So there's different ways to get into compliance. So some of those ways to go into compliance are not the most resilient ones or passive. As I mentioned, in the dry flood proofing, you can put panels, but you got to deploy them. They got to be installed the right way every single year. So there's different routes to it. A passive one, like the one that we do, you just leave it there, and then the skin of the building is prepared for anything. So once you don't have that incentive to hold the real estate, then also the way that you solve the problems is a little bit different. You're more in and out of that property, and it becomes a lot more transactional.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas where we see in New York City, some of these other buildings that have residential, units on the top that could have been sold, but then these companies still hold the commercial because there are a lot of mixed use buildings. Then they have an incentive financially to mitigate the building, to prevent the business to have loss of business because they got to shut down for several months. Because after you get all of that damage, it's not that you can jump in and repair everything right away. You still got to pull permits. Sometimes the building officials and the authorities having jurisdiction, they'll smooth things out for small repairs during a state of emergency, but you still got to go through electrical checks. You got to go through anything that got to be plumbing, walls, you name it. So then forget about the big corporate or university or hospital, like you were saying, like an NYU. That's a monster company. Think about just the franchisee of any franchise. I don't want to say names because you're not advertising them, but any of your favorite coffee franchises there, the loss of revenue is incredible if they shut down for a month. It could be even more than a month to get that done because their neighbors are also having the same impact. So then is how many qualified contractors you have to fix all of that area. Mm-hmm. So that changes the way that the developers and the property managers and real estate operators decide about how to design their building. Mm-hmm. And if they have that, they're more open to invest in the solutions because they're thinking long term. And then obviously you got your essential facilities, hospitals, research centers, where there's I would say a different ball game because they're always thinking long term. And somebody that's investing, like you said, millions of dollars to have a mouse, go through different things. They definitely have a different way of thinking, and they want to protect that as much as they can. A big component to it is education. There's still a lot of architects and construction professionals, engineers that don't know about these solutions, mm-hmm. and then they'll go to the old ways, like I was mentioning, the flood logs. By having a really quick conversation, I remember I was in New Jersey in a conference. It was a national national or no New Jersey Floodplain Manager Association. Uh, I had discussions with one of the floodplain managers in New Jersey, and I don't recall the exact event, but most of the damages to the buildings happened in buildings that had the locks, had the, let's say, the equipment, but they didn't get deployed. So the thing is that, and I say this funny when in a funny way when I'm doing presentations. The same company that is selling the product in your geographical region is gonna be, and they're operating for 5 years.
Mhm.
It's gonna be the same one deploying these systems in the whole area that they've been selling for 5 years within the same amount of time. Because a lot of buildings require to third-party companies to deploy them because they don't have enough people in staff
Mhm.
to do it, or they don't have the proper training. So a lot of issues come from deployable systems. Although I won't demonize them.
Mhm.
Some buildings have to go for them at certain openings. Have cars passing. So I really think that passive systems are the way to go,
Mhm.
and it's a matter of educating and having the right spec. And to the beginning of your point, having the right spec from the beginning in the pre-construction documents is going to save a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems down the road. So on our end, we spend a lot of time educating architects, engineers, general contractors, so they know how and what should be specified
Mhm.
within our realm of expertise so you can get the best project possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like for me, I guess I have a mindset of like you can't always account for everything, right? And especially when it comes to floodwaters. I mean, especially most houses nowadays, you have there's so many windows, so many openings, so many, right? And there's always that one snarky dude who's like, oh, well, what about the doors? I'm like, what about the doors? Like, I mean, look, that was one of the conversations we've had, with someone who's just like trying to devil's advocate, which I appreciate. But the other side was like, well, okay, you sealed up, you got all the windows, check. You make sure, hopefully, that you don't have any like cracks or breaks in your foundation or whatever, so that water doesn't bleed in. Your roof should be okay. Check, check. He goes, yeah, but you still have a port. It's called your door. I'm like, okay, so he goes, well, what about that? I'm like, Swiss Army knife. Like, can you walk and chew gum? Can you right? Like, can you comb your hair and breathe? You're not always gonna have the same thing for everything, and you could solve for that. And that's my point of see, the problem that I usually tend to have is when you say, well, there's this one point and this doesn't fix everything, then I'm not going to do it. I'm like, go find another solution. There is a solution for it. It just doesn't have to be one size fits all, right? And this is
That's
where,
correct.
as I talk to other people now, unfortunately now, Bergen County in Jersey is one of those top school districts, and everyone wants to move there and all this jazz. But unfortunately, a big part of Bergen County has now flood issues, or rather, the flood issues are getting worse or more prevalent. And so now it's one of those weird things of like, dude, I just spent $1.5 million on a house, and I spent another $500,000 renovating this thing, and then the next storm that sweeps on in, I'm just going to be taking a bath, literally. And I'm like, now if you think you're going to stay there, I would strongly recommend, because again, homes and commercial buildings also built differently, right? Generally speaking,
100%.
generally. So for me, my concern always becomes mold. But a lot of people that we have seen in that area, they're like, okay, we like the sump pump is working, we drain out the water, we try to like mop off the floors. I'm like, and then what? I'm like, what do you mean? And then what? We had some fans running around, and like, no, did you open up your walls? She's like, why would I do that? I'm like, because the water permeated your walls. And now, if there's mold in that house, those spores will go all the way through, and that's how you get a sick house. Like if you start getting inexplicable things where you keep getting sick and stuff like that because you didn't take the time to like, or if you know or you feel like the like plane is getting closer and closer to your block. Again, take a look at your finances, please. Don't bankrupt yourself and stuff like that. But like this is where every time one of my friends move, I'm like, just do yourself a favor, take a look at the floodplain map. If it's close enough to where it's uncomfortable, if you have the money now, start putting in your floodproofing, contingencies and all the safety measures that you can, so that and learn how to use it. Like to your point, like if you if you have something where you have to deploy, don't just buy it, thank the guy, close the door, and like, leave it in the closet somewhere. Like try using it, deploy it, learn how it works. And so
Exactly.
that couple like that investment for me, that's an investment. It's not for you to just brag to your neighbors that you spent like however much it costs for these upgraded say out the windows. I'm like, no, like understand that you just protected your house, right? And this investment that you just spend all this money on, and for your family, it's like that's what you're doing it for. For business purposes, again, I had this same talk with Brian. Like, so owners may just hope and pray, but I mean, do you really want to have to go through an insurance claim to say, oh, well, the floodwaters came, destroyed all my inventory, and now we also have to do the construction to fix all the things that broke and all the water damage that came to the store, or we could just say, as a landlord, hey, I already have the system in place. Just understand, maybe the doors, because it opens and shuts, and I don't know what solutions there are for
Yeah,
that. Like, as a landlord, I'll try my obviously we'll try to deploy that, but do me a favor. Understand that the reason why you may be paying more in rent is because I made sure that this glass is safe for you, right? And look, if there's a failure, that's a whole different issue. But
you got a great point there, Alex. When you're touching on properties like that that are mitigated or not mitigated, in Florida, you see it in the residential market, where if you have one house next to each other, and let's say they're like houses from the 80s or 90s, that like early 90s before the impact windows came in, the one that has been mitigated with impact windows, and sometimes they'll even put like extra straps on the roof to make sure they're safe, or like a redesign, they'll have more value in the marketplace than the twin house next door that is not mitigated.
Mhm.
We have not seen that on the flood market.
Mhm.
And currently, there's some buildings, and this is for the commercial and the residential side, where their insurance premiums are the largest side from a natural disaster standpoint. Not talking about fire and other events, but let's say like hurricane, flooding, and there's not a model yet that allows you to put a value into the mitigation. Like you say, if you were to do the investment into protecting this house and make it safe for a flood event,
Mhm.
the flood event that corresponds to whatever you live, there is no model yet that provides that property with more value.
Mhm.
And also, I don't believe there's yet an insurance model that provides you the right amount of premium savings because you mitigated the property.
Mhm.
So that's, for me, is a big point. Now, and we were in the industry. Damage coming from flooding is 10 times bigger than the ones coming from hurricane, tornadoes, fires, anything else in the country. If you look at FEMA, it's double digits by far. It's more than 50% of the claims that they have are coming from flood events.
Of course.
So right away there, you see where all the pile of money from FEMA is going to.
Mhm.
So we should be mitigating these buildings. If it's a new building, I will say, unless it's strictly necessary, you should raise the building to keep it outside of the design flood elevation. Obviously, I would like them to be under so we can put more windows out there, but I will put them outside of the flood height.
Yeah.
And if you got a retrofit, or in cities like New York City, that you cannot build this big podium above ground,
Mhm.
or like downtown Miami or places like these in other metropolitan areas in the country, I think we should be pushing more towards mitigation than anything else, because what we've been doing is just fix what is broken instead of seeing why the things are getting broken.
Mhm.
And this is an unsustainable problem. As you see, the all the federal funding that has to go to FEMA, they're broke. They don't have enough cash to cover all the events that they have. And something else, and I know there's a lot of naysayers. There is a thing about, and I won't call it like global warming, but I'll call it climate change. You see areas in the country, and Alex, you live here in the U.S. since you were a kid. You see, there's some other areas of the country that never saw this flooding or these hurricanes, and now they're getting impacted by them. So there's definitely a shift, and that shift is gonna start putting some pressure on insurance, and this is typically the way that it follows. It's going to put pressure on insurance, and then insurance is going to put pressure on building codes,
Mhm.
and then after the building codes is going to come the enforcement, where buildings are going to have the requirements
Mhm.
to be mitigated for whatever the hazard may be. I mean, California could be fires with the just remember the fires that were happening there. Which, by the way, we also are in the fire resistance space, and all of these different hazards. But it's something that us as a country, we gotta, I think, ride by the horns and just work towards that, because a lot of the infrastructure is old and it's not going to be rebuilt. So you got to retrofit it, and once you do that, you got to have a comprehensive approach to it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and you brought up two things that well, one thing, but I want to add another curiosity. There's one thing, at least over by me, and from my understanding around the country, it's not a necessarily common practice, but for like us, Jersey is definitely one of them. But New York, I do start to see it more. We have something called the Clue Report, which tells me what things have you claimed on your homeowner's insurance. And for me, the minute I see water, it's like it's like a buddy. No, 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 no,
Well,
no. We're trying to be clever here, and you're not gonna get me. Now, for me, that side of I wonder in the future if you are mitigated properly, and let's say your neighbors all getting flooded out and yours doesn't. Would that eventually become a thing where you could start from homeowners perspective, be like, look, I invested so that this house is protected sufficiently. I mean, there's nothing that's like 1,000% flood proof or whatever proof, like God proof, right? But feel free. Look, I'll pull up the report for you, right? And feel free to compare it to the people downstairs. Like I haven't had a flood issue or water issue here in years since I put the system in. I have the receipts, and for homeowners from tax bases, understand that this depending on what you work on, there's certain things that when it comes to fixing your home could act to increase your basis, so you don't pay that much in tax when you sell. But that's a whole talk to your CPA, talk to your tax people. That's a separate issue. Um, but yeah, I mean, I wonder if that is eventually going to be one of those things where it becomes a selling point, right? So for you
it
realtors out
should.
there, it
They
should.
do it for cars.
Yeah, it should. One
So when
thousand
you're
percent.
gonna buy a car, in the title you see how many owners, was it a rebuild, was it crash, and if you're talking about the homeowner, the investment on a house is a much bigger investment
Mhm.
than the car, and you can find a lot easier information about your car just with a big number. There should be something like that for like residential buildings, where you can have a better understanding about, like you said, what have been the claims in the building. If the neighbors are, then like if you're gonna buy, I don't know, a Corolla, if you see the one that was flooded or rebuilt or crashed, that one has less of a value than exactly same year, same miles, without any issues.
Mhm.
And I think that way you could make a much better decision as a homeowner on mm, the biggest investment for most of the people in the country. That's the biggest investment that you do in a lifetime.
Mhm.
So I think that kind of databases should be out there. And actually, I know a couple of pals in the industry that are trying to develop these models, and they're pushing hard. There's this gentleman, Albert Lab, that I've been in contact with. He's been pushing hard to try to create a model where you, they can assess the value of a property from a flood mitigation standpoint. And if it's protected or not protected, and that will give you a more data, the better the
Mhm.
decision you're gonna make.
Yep. So I'm most likely going to be getting messages from a lot of angry realtors because I just let a lot of people know what the Clue report was. It's essentially Carfax for homes. So
Exactly.
like you guys start sending me angry messages, I'm not answering them. So just so just save yourself. But on to the two things that I'm curious about. So one obviously is gonna be the fire portion of it, but you know I don't think it's fair to call it high impact glass per se because it seems to me that the products that you have kind of exceed what most common folk would say as impact glass. And for me, I'm thinking it more in lines of, again, unfortunately, it's the world that we live in. Do you have particular specific products that are geared towards being, I'm not saying riot proof, but riot resistant?
Yes, and that's a big part of our business in South Florida. Uh, Mainly, we have gone into the and I would even call it high end, but super high end retail. So we do a lot of work in Design District, which is an area here in, let's call Design District will be kind of like your Fifth Avenue down here in Miami, where you have all the high end stores.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, there's a couple of items this kind of client are looking for. They're looking for beautiful, facades, maximizing the view of their stores so they can, showcase their products and make it look beautiful, elegant. Then they have the hurricane requirement, which comes because of the location that they're at. They're in the middle of Miami. And then another item for them really big and now becoming bigger and bigger is, like riots or like, prior to a storm, you can see a lot of, people trying to break in stores because, they're empty and you name it, like a lot of break and entry attempts. So we have combined these three things, which is first making it oversized, making it as clear as it can be so you can see inside the stores. Then making it hurricane rated so you can have impact rating, pressure, like a wind pressure rating. And then after providing a what they call a break and entry resistance. There's different levels, and the levels are determined based on what tool is the person trying to break in using and how long are they able to try to break in. So that gives more time to law enforcement to access the premises and take care of the problem. So we have one of the highest ratings for these kind of products, and is on that particular arena is one of the driving factors for us to be specifying these projects. The break and entry protection and the hurricane.
So
these are jewelries and all of the fancy brands that are out there. If you want to be named, call Alex.
Yeah. I mean, see now you got the mischievous boy in me curious. Just out of curiosity, let's call it. Let's say this is the Mac Daddy. This is your flagship. Come at me, bro. Like I would put my family behind this glass, right? And God forbid something happens. What can it withstand?
So depending on the threat that you're having, you will use a different system. But let's say the bulletproof flood window that I was mentioning, we use for the World Trade Center. That one will hold several shots of .38 caliber, like NATO .38 caliber. So that's a rifle, like a AR-15 type of rifle. So you can stand behind that. And at the same time, you can have 10 foot of water, which you're talking.
That's a lot.
Almost more than a standard, but like first floor in America. You can stand behind that and having that kind of flow of waters behind it, and you'll be dry on the opposite side. Actually, I got a pretty cool picture of one of our of the company partners behind the glass during testing, just touching it and just chilling behind it. And that's a pretty cool picture that we use in presentations. And then from a floating debris impact, we have done tests of up to 1,000 pounds. So imagine 1,000-pound log impacting the glass at 8 feet per second several times. And even after the breakage of the glass happened, it will still hold the water.
Jesus. So essentially, I mean, let's go with common vandalism objects, right? So things like crowbars, cinder blocks, bricks, rocks, those are just going to bounce off.
Correct. That those wouldn't be the biggest concern, and that's one of the reasons we go to the retail, because the system will hold crowbars, rocks, and anything. Like even a rock could bounce back.
Jesus. Okay, I'm liking this so far. Now let's talk fire, right? Because obviously, again, frame reference for me. Surprisingly, we are having more like forest fire type situations in Jersey. California's had it for forever, although it seems to be more vicious these days. Can you talk me through how this fits into a system? I mean, for me, there is a little bit of a curiosity here, because the irony here will be for those who already own a pre-existing home and they're not fireproofing everything, you might be left with like ashes and fireproof glass, right? but
exactly.
But can you talk me through like the importance of these, how these function, what the relevance is for whether it's a business or a homeowner, like how that works?
100%. So there's different depending on the type of building and depending on the jurisdiction. So, in the U.S., every state, like for example, in Florida, we have the Florida Building Code. In New York, you have the International Building Code. But if you go to New York City, you have is I call it always a international building code with some sprinkles on top and some more specific things that come with having so many high rises, so much density of people, etc., etc. So the reason I'm starting with this is because not all solution fits all, and every jurisdiction can have different requirements or even more stringent requirements for a system. In our case, we have a fire rated system. We can provide systems that are impact rated for a hurricane, but at the same time, fire rated up to 60 minutes. So the way that this works from just the fenestration system point is you're required to hold the fire and the temperature on the side that it got initiated for 60 minutes at least. Or system, for example, exceeded that time. But the reason that you want that is, again, is for firefighters being able to get to the premises and prevent the fire from spreading to other parts of the building, or if you're in a double dwelling, to your neighbor or anything like that. We get a lot of requests from this. It's common to have houses in Florida that will have generators really close inside the lot line for a hurricane when you lose power, and all of these are either a gas or gas oil powered, so they represent a fire hazard. So any fenestration within a certain distance gotta have that. Or when you have, let's say, if your means of egress are within window areas, those windows got to be like in catwalks or areas like that. So it's not just a fenestration product answer. It's a comprehensive solution, same as flooding. It's like your window can be flood proof, but if you don't have a flood rated system for the wall, then the water's going to go through the wall, because concrete and masonry are pervious materials. Water's going to go through. So the same thing happens with fire. It got to be a comprehensive solution. You need fire rated walls, you need fire rated perimeters, you need fire rated rafters, and then it comes for like the steel structure. Same, you see that they apply these foams that are fire retardants. So it's a comprehensive solution where we only get involved for the fenestration, and it's not only the glass, the one that needs to be fire rated, but also the frame. Because, and I'm going to put a pretty bad example, but if you hold a fire rated glass to a plastic frame that is not a special plastic, the plastic is just going to melt, and the glass is just going to collapse, and then you're going to have a new source of oxygen, etc., etc. Other part interesting of the test is that they call it the water hose test. So it's not only the fire, but you got one side or two side water hose test, which is a test designed by UL, and now is, I will say, pretty widespread throughout the whole U.S. And it's trying to represent how is the change in temperature once you get water, whether it's sprinklers or it's a firefighter applying to it. Because if something's really hot and you apply the water, that changes it, it will create a thermal shock, and you want the system to be able to keep its structural integrity even when you apply that thermal shock. So I will say, from a basic standpoint, those are the two of the main things that we've seen. Now there's a lot more sophisticated systems, more hours, two-side rated, for walkable surfaces, you name it. The industry keeps evolving, and some things are not addressed in the code. So then it's the building officials that say, okay, there's a gap here. What is the best way? And you will have site-specific testing, or things such as, special fire rating consultant looking at the project and giving some guidance into it.
Yeah, and this is because I was always thinking, like, what about the fires from the outside? Is that what the purpose of this thing is, right? And I imagine to an extent it can be. It might be helpful. And as you talk through it, in terms of a common layman homeowner, of like, the hell, like, so why would I care about fireproof glass in my house? Like, I'm not gonna have fire in my house. I beg to differ. And this past winter actually was really bad for us where I live. Unfortunately, it was one of the things. We're looking at, in this case, it was, you're looking at a lot of pre-war buildings, apartment buildings, and unfortunately, a lot of these PR buildings, or just, it could be anywhere, right? But you have a couple things. You have PR buildings with old wiring, potentially. Hopefully, a lot of them were updated, but some of them weren't, or not sufficiently. Or you have some weekend warrior electricians who decide to play with different gauge wires. And when you are talking about people who are trying to save money, and they hook up space heaters, for instance, and it overloads the system, and a fire starts, unfortunately, or maybe, what, it could be anything, right? Or you have a rat problem, they start chewing through the wires, and then now you have a fire problem. There's so many different ways for this to happen, right? Is my point. One of the earliest things I remember being taught from a firefighter was, hey, close the door, walk away, and get everyone else out. Never touch it. Like, if the door is hot, if the door handle's hot, don't open it ever. Now, I preface this because one thing that we noticed is that as some of these apartment fires have happened, the windows would shatter open. Now, this is an interesting thing here, because one of the reasons why a firefighter doesn't want you to open the door, obviously, is so that the fire doesn't spread. The problem becomes if the fire in that room, it would have been contained until that window shatters open, and now that just became a blowtorch. You just have a fire that may fizzle out, or at least slow the spread. Well, the minute that window shatters, you have a rush of air coming in, and now the rest of your building or house or whatever, it just became very, 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 very vulnerable. And so, I'm not gonna say that landlords are gonna suddenly turn around and start putting all these high, because I'm assuming they're gonna be significantly more expensive than whatever low grade window they're installing. But here's the
Yes.
problem: what could have been, say, a $50,000 fix, maybe, more, well, assuming that, like, that unit is burnt out, it might be what, 150, 200,000. Let's just call it 200,000 for simple math. Well, guess what? Because of this one issue, this turned into a $2 million fix, because you couldn't be bothered. Right. And now, for me as a homeowner, for me, I'm at a point as a father, right? I'm a father of two. Like, maybe doesn't fit my budget. Maybe it doesn't. But again, just for me, and my mentality nowadays is, what's the harm of asking? Like, if I get to a point where I could at least say, hey, dude, like, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna buy your product right now, but out of curiosity, how much would it cost to, say, replace at least the bedroom windows, right? Because
So from a standard window, and I'm going to use South Florida impact windows as a basis, because you're in Jersey, so the systems are different over there. You'll be looking at probably 2.5 to 3 times the cost of an average window, if it's within those sizes. Another thing that comes on our industry, because we specialize in oversized windows, so we do like that, like wow size windows on lobbies and things like that. That then there is a different animal in terms of cost, because you start reducing a lot the people that can produce it. But on standard sizes, you'll be looking probably to triple the cost of a standard system.
that makes sense, right? Is it about, in terms of, maybe this is a dumb question, but in terms of soundproofing and or with insulation, is it better, same, worse? Like, how's that work?
Installation, I will say, is pretty much the same. Now, this is from the window perspective only, uh, because then you have, like we were discussing, that the windows will be fine if you do them, and there is, as a matter of fact, different reasons why you will use fire windows, because they will work either direction. So one to be from your house to not spread, but also if you get fire from outside, to not go into the inside of the building, and yeah, you'll get like paint damage, and you'll have to fix exterior, but you won't necessarily have to replace the house, because you just got all compromised. So the cost and process of installing a regular size window, either if it's fire or not fire, is the same. But I mentioned this because there's other things that you should do to your property in order to make it fire rated, and then define that rating. That's not my expertise, the property fire rating. But by working with consultants over the years, you see that it's not just the openings; it's a lot more finishing, coating. What are you doing between the window and the perimeter? There's phones, special, insulators that you will use. The structure of the roof also got to have different approach. The structure got to be different. Studs, electric, anything. So there's a lot of requirements that go in order to make a building fire rated,
Mm-hmm.
that is not just the fenestration products. But you start from there.
Of course. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's oftentimes we go through this like, oh, I want, again, like let's say I want a completely fireproof, bulletproof house. All right, well, great. I mean, but understand, not just a solution. It's a whole series. It's an orchestra of things that need to come together, and you need to understand how they come together, how they operate,
Correct.
how you to utilize it. Because otherwise, you're just a moron with a sledgehammer thinking everything gets sledgehammered. Like, no, sometimes you need a saw, right? But
Yeah, and it's like a bulletproof car.
yeah.
You don't only take care of the windows. You got to put like steel plates on the doors, and it's a whole retrofit of the vehicle
Mm-hmm.
in order to make it like that. So I agree with you. And the problem is that it's costly
Mm-hmm.
for the regular homeowner. I will say it's for in the country,
Mm-hmm.
it's something really really hard to do, and not something that I think you'll get along really easy.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, as a financial decision, you'll say, is it worth for me to do it? And then the question goes back to our previous conversation. Okay, would I do the investment for your family? If you have the capital, definitely you will do it. But from a financial standpoint, can then after get my money back when I sell the property, and because my neighbor doesn't have it and I have it,
Mm-hmm.
am I gonna have that premium on the cost of the property?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is most of the time no, because you're not gonna get that investment spread within you and your neighbors at
Yeah.
home.
Well, I mean, as I tell most folks, look, understand remodels, renovations are for you, not for your price, right? And this is where I tell them, look, the windows are going to be most likely. Well, maybe it'll change in the future. I'm hopeful, but not likely. It's like look, you want to spend $100,000 when you're doing your living room and all that. Great, perfect. It's going to be, if it's up to date or over remodeled compared to your neighbors. Don't think that suddenly you're going to get that same price on the sale value. It's not. This just
No.
doesn't work that way, right? So please understand that this is more for you to have a peace of mind. However, right now obviously I'm usually in New York. This right now I'm in Georgia, um, and I happen to be in a community at a golf course. Now
Okay.
I'm tempted to start talking to some of the neighbors to ask them how many times does a golf ball fly through your window, because I might have somebody to talk to.
I always ask the same question when I'm in a country club.
Yep. And so I think I'm gonna start poking around and see if if it's a problem for them. Look, I got a guy you could talk to.
And that's sometimes a driving factor for us in how we go to market. They have a high risk of something impacting their window
Mhm.
beyond the impact, the hurricane and all that, and they'll say, hey, look, we're trying to protect this. We want something that is not going to break every single time, and
Mhm.
they want to have the view. Let's say it's a garden or something like that, and the homeowners will do that investment because they want to have that super big view without having the risk of that glass breaking for no reason,
Mhm.
only with wind pressure or something like that. Because you can also put, similar to the flood locks,
Mhm.
you're also allowed to put are you familiar with hurricane shutters?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So you can have non-impact systems, and they have to be rated for the pressure, but not for the impact. So some people put the shutters, but they'll say like, this looks ugly, we don't like it, and especially if you got a big opening.
Mhm.
So that's another decision to change them to oversized impact system.
Oh. Oh, you got my nerd brain going crazy right now. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. And I think between you, Mr. Johnson, I get the feeling that I'm just gonna have to keep poking y'all to keep sharing more. But for now, am I forgetting anything immediately? Is there anything else you want to share immediately?
So I mean, I think that one of the things that I would like for you, to know, and as the and you probably spoke about that with Brian Johnson, is there is a lot of work happening, in at building official, a code, international building code, ASE code standards, where you see the push, and I don't want to get too political there,
Mm-hmm.
but you see that I don't know if it's coming from FEMA, but they're sounding the alarms of this is costing us too much money,
Mm-hmm.
and we got no way to control it. I mean, it's Mother Nature. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to be done. The only thing that can be done is mitigated. So we've seen the traction where the new ASC 24 came and it's changing the requirements and the approach to flood-proofing buildings. ASC 7 in its new version also addressing a lot more subjects that have been present for decades and were unattended. Unfortunately, you know how it works. It's all about the money. So when it starts costing somebody a lot of money, then the attention goes there because there's been flooding for decades. And now you see it more in the news and it's all over the place. But I think the alarms were sound. There's a movement now to mitigate and try to resolve this problem. It's just a matter of all the parties involved to really want to get this done, because you see a lot of people, like you mentioned, trying to cut corners, and by trying to cut corners to cut costs, they're just leaving homeowners or just their clients at a commercial real estate standpoint exposed. And because there's not a lot of education, they don't know it, and then you get impacted with this first event, then your premium is just going to go up on your insurance. And that's the reality we're facing right now. I know it's happening in Jersey because I talked to Brian about that. But if you see in the news, a lot of insurance are leaving the state of Florida because there's just so much claims, and they'll go bankrupt. And whether you get the state empty, and that's not going to happen, actually, there's more people moving to the state of Florida than the ones leaving, or you mitigate so you can solve that problem of claims, and also the part of safety. But it's not all the floodings are like life threatening. There's some that is just an insurance problem. And I think that's something I wanted to mention here, that we're working with a lot of the federal agencies and some of the third-party agencies that are not government related to try to push these initiatives, investing money into resilience. And the last couple of years, we have really seen local governments getting involved and trying to push it. So I think we're moving in the right direction. We should accelerate, but at least it's moving.
And I appreciate that. From the first call that I have with you, what was really impressive is the technology. Because let's be clear here, this is technology that you guys have developed, that you have curated, that you have continually obsessed over. And for me, there's a fascination point because again, my nerd brain never seems to quit on me. But I do appreciate the lens that you have gone through to not only developing but continuing to improve these technologies so that you could have better product solutions for the masses. And I think that the work that you're doing is incredibly important in terms of not just looking after your business, right? Because the product development and all that is right. Let's keep it honest, that it's good for the business, but the advocating for having better, secure, sound construction methods and methodologies for the masses, I think is important. And so I do appreciate the work that you guys are really pushing
Thank you very much, Alex. We're really proud of it, and we're passionate about developing new products. We have, like we always say, architectural and an engineer eye. So we want to bring super safe and cutting edge solutions to the masses, but that also preserve the view and make buildings look beautiful. So we are thrilled to develop this and having people like yourself interested on them. And hopefully we'll talk again. And anytime if you're in Florida, in South Florida, please come by, and we'll love to show you our lab where we do a lot of the product development and our facility. That'll be great.
That's going to be one of my road trip checklists now. But for those who for those who want to reach out, connect with you or your company, where can they find you?
So our website is www.fanx.com, and you can look me up in LinkedIn as Juan Manuel Posada and under FanX LLC.
Perfect. So all the relevant links and all that jazz will be in the description below. So if you have any questions, come reach out. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Thank you, Alex.